that was the thing. We were sitting outside and was like trying to watch a movie and it was so fucking loud. And I'm just like, it's literally getting dark. What are you doing? Anywho.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fuck Your Podcast. I'm Emma Pardo.
And I'm Katy Martin. And today we're going to talk about a fun summer topic because we're all outside more. We're going to talk about inconsiderate neighbors. So do you have inconsiderate neighbors or are you the inconsiderate neighbor? So yeah, I think this is fun because I have very specific pet peeves when I'm trying to enjoy my yard.
Right. Well, I was about to say you've lived in the same house since 1999.
Okay, Justin bought it in 97. I moved in 99.
Justin bought it before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've only been out on my own since 2021. It's only been 3 years that I've flown from the nest. So in the amount of time that you've been in that house, have you seen a lot of shift in like neighbors?
Oh yeah, because we have like, you have like the neighborhood pillars, these old people who are gonna like die in these houses here.
Right.
but own the house. They obviously own houses and raised kids before we moved in,
right.
Or their kids were older when our kids were brand new. So I can definitely see there's common things that are the inconsiderate, and sometimes I probably could be lumped into the inconsiderate, although I'm very self-conscious about it. If I do something that I think is being an inconsiderate neighbor, it bothers me, and I try to make up for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a shift in neighbors because we are in a subdivision that you can clearly see was like the first phase of the subdivision, and then you move towards the back and there's the second phase of the subdivision, so it's been around for a while,
right?
And after they built of the subdivision, which was still well before we moved in, like well before, you could tell people started moving more back there, and then the houses up here became, grandma, grandpa specials, like people started to pass away. So then, somebody bought it or inherited it, they turned it into a rental house. A lot of there's not a ton of rental property, but I would say there's probably like 2 to 3 rental houses on each street. So you get a good mix. You have a good mix of people where you can tell that these are like some of the houses these are starter houses for a young family. We're still in the starter house for a young family, and we hung in there because it's going to be the perfect empty nest house for.
Well, right. That's what I was about to say. And that's my dad's, he built his house as a starter house.
Yeah.
He's still in there, but he's also an empty nester. So it's like, it went from real crowded to like, it was like, this is a great house for me. Then it got real crowded with 4 kids. Then now that all the 4 kids are moved out, it's like back to that good spot again. You have enough room. You don't necessarily need more. Yeah, since when I moved to Texas in 2022, first I had my apartment that was in West County.
That's totally different. Like that's a totally different neighbor vibe, I would imagine.
That is a totally different neighbor vibe. However, I don't know. I didn't really have a bad experience with neighbors. I felt bad the one time. I guess my washer got disconnected from the drain for it. I didn't know. And so I started my washer one night before bed, and I was woken up in the middle of the night to the maintenance guy knocking on my bedroom door. Like he had already entered my apartment.
Oh, wow.
Scared the shit out of me. But I had flooded the neighbor below me. I had flooded the apartment. And it was just because it had disconnected. I don't know how it disconnected because I never moved. So I feel like an inconsiderate neighbor there, but also it's like that's like the only thing.
That's an accident.
Yeah. But when I moved to Texas, we were in Magnolia, and we were in like a starter home neighborhood, and it was empty when we moved there. And then it filled up really quick, but it filled up with like the worst people you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
And so we were like the considerate neighbors there. We had so many inconsiderate neighbors, and it was like every day we'd wake up with some kid's article of clothing in our yard or their toy. And they weren't playing with Crew. It's not like we didn't allow Crew to play with these kids because they were much older than him, but 2, they were always doing something we weren't supposed to, or trying to like walk to different parts of the neighborhoods where we couldn't see them. And at 4 to 5 year old, you're not going to let him do that. But it would be like so much trash in our yard that wasn't ours. And then just having like, we still rented the house, but we were in the middle of moving everything, and somebody started parking in our driveway. So when we went to get the last of the things out of that house, we had to ask someone to move their truck. Like
out of your driveway. Like that's
out of our driveway.
Yeah.
And so Cole went and knocked on the door, and they weren't like the friendliest to him. Like it was an inconvenience to them. He's like, we're just trying to get the last of our shit out of our house. Like, can you move your truck? But now that we've moved into this house, what's funny about this neighborhood is that it was built for a retired community. So it was like they weren't selling to anybody that was below the age of 50. And our landlords are over the age of 50, but they allow us to rent being 26 years. And all of our neighbors are like 70 plus years old, the nicest people ever. And I am just like, I hope we're not the inconsiderate neighbors. We don't ever have people over or we're doing anything, but I don't know. It's just that maybe this is me judging, but it's like they're the older generation and they see 26-year-olds moving in. They're probably like, just like automatically assuming against us. But that's me assuming that they're acting that way.
Right. Well, most people though, you either live in an area because you like the kids in the area or you don't like kids. And I think that's a bigger distinction, because even little kids, they're not inconsiderate. They're just kids. So Justin, he'll always tell the story of the reason he bought this house was because he drove through it in the fall and there were kids everywhere. And he's like, someday I want to have kids. I want a neighborhood that like kids can safely walk around or ride their bikes or play. And our kids did. So, I mean, our neighborhood is a pretty good mix. So like things like that, like a kid's bike ending up in our yard or something like that, that's not inconsiderate neighbors. That's
a bike. Okay, the kid's gonna come back and pick that up.
Right. Yeah.
But these were like, it would be like random t-shirts and like shorts. It's like, what are you kids doing undressing in the street?
Yeah. Where are your parents?
And then they would just be like there for days. We wouldn't touch them for days because we assume somebody would come pick them up, and they would be there for days. Trash would be there. You're like,
I can definitely tell. So like things that here, so these are the things that I would view as like what most people think is inconsiderate neighbors. So parking is a huge thing. So, and that's where I get paranoid, because if I go get the camper, I get the camper the day before we leave, and I almost feel like I need to talk to all my neighbors, especially the guy who lives across the street, and just be like, hey, I promise this thing is never going to sit here more than 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
Usually, and I try to be very particular, like if we're leaving tomorrow, I'm going to pick it up today, put stuff in it, and then we're leaving in the morning. So like my 29-foot camper, which makes it hard for him to pull out of his driveway. He's just got to pay closer attention, and he's a fine driver. He's just older. It makes it hard to see.
Well, you just want to be considerate, going, hey, I'm sorry. I know that this is probably an inconvenience, but it won't be here long.
Yeah, just know that if you see the camper in front of the house, we're leaving the next day. So, but yeah, parking's one of those things where, and again, that's where I would say if someone's having a party, like letting your neighbors know that, hey, we're gonna have a bunch of cars parked. I apologize for any inconvenience. And I would say for the most part, most of our neighbors probably don't care. And the neighbors that are never home, like if it's a single dude who works a lot and he's just never there. But I would never park in someone's driveway like that.
No, they parked in our driveway. And mind you, the driveway was without cars for a couple of days. We normally parked in the driveway. I think I parked in the garage a couple of times. But then when we moved our gym into the garage, I was in the driveway. And like it'd been a couple days, but it was like we had been back and forth before. So it's like people were there. And I get it looks vacant. However, it wasn't even the neighbor. It was the neighbor's buddy that kept doing it. That was like staying with him.
Oh, yeah.
It was just parking in the driveway. And it's like,
there was a TikTok video.
It wasn't one side or the other. They parked like smack dab in the middle, and we're trying to load heavy stuff out. So Cole's got to back his truck up. He's like, I can't fit. I can't fit anything here. So when Cole went to go talk to him, they were pissy with him. He was like, we just have to get our stuff. You're parked in our driveway. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, we'll get that. And then the girl that came over to get the truck was like, she was just pissy.
It's like, what kind of entitlement do you think like that would drive me nuts. That is total inconsiderate neighbors. I saw a TikTok video that it was like, am I the asshole for having my neighbor's car towed? And the story was, it was like a mom coming home from work late with her baby who was asleep in the car, and she couldn't get in her driveway because the neighbor he liked parking in her driveway. And like something like that, I'd be like, who the fuck are you? Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. And so she had the car towed. Then the guy comes over banging on her door, like in, late at night. Where's my car? She's like, don't fucking park it here. I've asked you. And then I warned you. And then I had it towed. She had every right. She had every single right to have that car towed.
Absolutely.
And something like that I wouldn't tolerate. Like, I mean, parking on the street, again, no one's entitled to the street. It can be inconvenience, it can be a pain, but that's the thing, is like, be considerate. So The
Right.
one, and when it comes to kids, and I'll tell you a story from when my next door neighbor is like one of my best friends. She doesn't live there anymore. But but right before I think she got married and she moved into that house, her husband had a teenage son at the time who
Hmm.
sat in the car in front of the house listening to music for like 2-3 hours at night, and we could clearly hear it, like sitting in our house at 10, 11 o'clock, sometimes midnight. And I'm like, if he keeps doing that, I'm gonna go out there and knock on the window and be like, get the fuck out of here, go in your house.
Yeah.
Like if it's loud enough I can hear it inside my house and I have babies that are sleeping, i'm
Right.
I'm gonna say something. The other thing too, like people down the street, there's this house down the street. I mean, I don't think any of my neighbors are gonna listen to this, so I don't care. But there's a house down the street that you can tell their adult children still live there, and I mean well into adulthood, probably in their upper 20s, still live at home, and they work on cars. So
Hmm.
there's always a half disassembled car parked on the street. And it's like, I know it's not inconveniencing me, but it makes everything else look like shit.
I was
Like,
about to say there's some things that it's just like if you know you're gonna have an eyesore in the neighborhood for a little while, at least be like, hey, this is my timeline. I'm sorry. Like I think that's inconsiderate if you're gonna make the whole neighborhood look bad. And that's what the issue that we had with the house in Magnolia was that
yeah,
when everybody started moving in, it was just trash everywhere. Like people, it's like people didn't have trash cans in their house, they were just throwing it out the window. Like that's how much trash was in the neighborhood.
yeah,
Just cars. Nobody took care of their lawn. Mind you, the lawn there, whatever they put in when they built the house, they didn't even put grass in or sod in.
yeah.
It just looked like shit. Everybody's lawn looked like shit. However, it was the amount of trash, the amount of clothing, the amount of beat up cars, the amount of like
Mhm.
the fact that it was families that were having like brothers and sisters and friends and like everybody stayed in this 3 bedroom 1 bath house, like, and the amount of cars in the street and the amount of beat up cars in the street, like nobody kept anything
Yeah.
nice. And
That's
so
probably more of an area thing, right? Like, it's like as opposed to, like, sometimes you have that in a like where it's a subdivision type of issue. Sometimes it's like, kind of the town's like that,
well, here's
you
the
know?
thing, the town was just small. It was Old
Yeah,
Town Magnolia, and it's a lot of like big houses are going up in that area, and they're making a lot of progress on construction, and it's going to be turned into like basically the Cypress area where we are now is like just
right.
a nice community, but it's like they needed this builder was like the first one out there, and they were like, I mean, we paid $1,500 for rent. So it was like relatively cheap compared to like other places that we've looked at. And yeah, it just went, it was such a cute neighborhood. It had so much potential and it went south so fast.
So I'm always paranoid that I'm the inconsiderate neighbor. So that's the thing, that parking on the street, making it inconvenient for neighbors. Again, having the camper, having the boat at the house, which I don't do unless we're using it the next morning.
Right.
Like, that's something I think most people get irked with that. But I wanted to talk about in my older age, now, things that just annoy me that really aren't my neighbors being inconsiderate. It's just me being an asshole.
Right.
So the other thing, we have a TV on the outside of the house that we like to enjoy the patio when the weather's not super hot. So Justin has that thing wired through an incredibly powerful stereo system with an amp going to outdoor speakers. And sometimes I could be like, dude, that's loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the neighbors don't need to hear the TV show that we're watching. It's like, that's loud. Like, there's times so we try to be very conscious of that. That kind of stuff never bothered me. So like, if it's a Saturday, we're outside, the neighbors behind us have a pool, they're having a party, they're having a good time. That's totally fine. The things that irk me are people who will put their dogs outside and they never stop barking.
Mm.
They just lose their minds. I
The
get it.
dogs bark one time outside and we go out there, we're like, shut up, like be
Yeah.
quiet.
No, like, literally, we can't sit out. Like, our neighbors' dogs have finally gotten used to us. So, and honestly, theirs weren't annoying. It was another neighbor with another dog where just constantly the dog just wouldn't stop. just wouldn't stop. And it's like, we can't even sit outside because this dog won't shut the fuck up. So that is annoying because we're not doing anything. We're literally just sitting outside or we're cooking outside, and they just see that we exist. Like, we're not even up walking around. They just see that we're there. The other things that I start to get annoyed with now, somebody mowing their grass super early on a weekend. I'm like, I get up at 5 o'clock every day except for Sundays. So if you're the asshole out using a leaf blower or a lawnmower or a gas-powered weed eater before 9 a.m., I'm on the verge of like
Before
shooting you with a
9, I feel like,
paintball
okay,
gun.
here's the thing. I feel like before 9 is like, I would say before 8. If it's
I mean,
before
and I don't ever say anything. Like, I'm not, it's not, and that's the thing. I'm not a neighborhood Karen, so I'm never going to say anything. It just annoys me.
yeah.
And, but I can't be the asshole because it's the summer. And it's like, those people have to work during the week. This is the only time they have to do it. It's going to be 100 degrees in the middle of the day.
I was going to say something that we have to like put in perspective is that it's heat index of 115 already here.
Right.
Like, it's stupid. I wake up at 6:30 and it's already almost 90 degrees. Like, I can understand getting that done, but most of our neighbors they have a lawn service that comes by.
Like, so a lot of times they come in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
They send 2 guys and it takes 15 minutes to get their grass cut.
Right.
Which is what we do. We pay somebody to cut our grass. He comes in a big ass lawnmower and he's here for 30 minutes, maybe.
Right. And gone.
And he's gone. So it's up to him when he wants to work because he chose that business, right?
Right.
Where everybody else is doing it because it's their lawn that they have to maintain. So I try to take that to consideration. So the morning doesn't bother me as bad because during the week and usually on Saturdays, I do get up pretty early. Sunday's my one day that I just want to herkle durkle, leave me alone. But
I can understand, like, Saturdays I feel like are for getting stuff done. Sundays I don't want to.
Just leave me alone. I have everything caught up. I'm prepping for the week. Leave me alone. Sundays I want to be left alone. And I don't want to wake up until my eyes open. Like,
yeah.
I don't want an alarm waking me up. I don't want to be messed with until my eyes open.
Yep.
And it's just, I don't care. I don't care who judges me for that. I don't give a fuck. It's one day a week. Just let me sleep until I wake up. So when I hear a lawnmower running 2 houses down and it's on a Sunday morning, not a ton of people do it, but there's always somebody. There's always one. And then the one that's bothering me right now, and this drives me nuts. So we like to enjoy the patio in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 weekends that we did that on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening, someone was mowing their grass
in the evening.
In the evening. And this was before it got hot. Yesterday was the first day it's been hot here. Summer. So I'm like, who mows their grass at 8 o'clock on a fucking Friday? Go inside. And I mean, and it was somebody like 2 houses down. I'm like, I hate that. Plus I'm allergic to grass. So like if I'm outside too long.
You'll feel it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like my sinuses will swell up. My throat will swell up. Like, I can't mow grass. That's just one thing I can't do. And so I can tolerate the smell when it's far away. I can't stand it when it's close. And I can't, and it was literally somebody with an adjacent yard, meaning my house is in the middle. It was either a neighbor on either side or somebody behind us. Like, it was one of those 5 houses. And I was just like, who mows the grass on 8 p.m. on a Friday or a Saturday? It was both fucking days on both weekends. Oof. So that's just me being cantankerous, but
yeah. I know Cole recently has been able to do it. Like, he'll do it during the day or like early enough in the morning, like 10 o'clock to where it's not horribly hot, but also that man sweats at literally anything. He's sweating when it's like 70 degrees in the house.
Yeah. But like with as hot as it is there, like if he wanted to get up at 6 a.m. and mow the grass at 7 a.m., I mean, on a weekday and a neighbor complains, I'd be like, fuck off. Why aren't you at work?
Right.
Like,
no, all of our neighbors are retired.
Right.
But they are always working in their yards. They've always got a lawn. So the one thing that we found, and this happened, and I feel like this neighbor does not like us, but Cole says he was super nice. So we had storms that had our fences were like worn. So it's like anything big that would have happened would have knocked them down. Well, we had a corner of our neighborhood, our backyard. The fence like broke off on one side. So it had like a crack open. So like we were afraid the dogs were going to see it and like go out while we weren't looking. But like we have a big bush that covers it. So we told our landlord they had somebody come out and fix it. And the guy that came out and fixed it, he needed a shovel. He didn't have a shovel. It wasn't a company. It was like a buddy of theirs.
Right.
And I went to go ask the neighbor. I'm like, can we borrow a shovel for like maybe an hour? Like, I'm so sorry. And he didn't seem like he seemed like very frustrated about it.
Oh,
I felt,
like, well, there's some people that they just don't like loaning their shit out.
yeah, I was like,
That's different.
I felt really bad. But so what we found out though is like Cole was trying to be helpful when he's cutting the grass. And I guess he was cutting right on the property line, like that, which is a normal thing.
Right.
The guy had come out to him and was like, well, no, that like I want to cut that part of the lawn. I'll cut up to like your side of the house. And then you cut all the way up to the next side of the house, which didn't seem right because there's the property lines on the like concrete. You see them and you can like gauge where they're at. And so Cole was kind of confused on that. I was like, I get it, but like, is it that big of a deal? And this guy's like really anal about his lawn. And so like to that neighbor, I feel like we're an inconvenience, but not trying to be like an inconvenience to his specific pet peeves that are typically not inconveniences to other.
Right. I've had a couple I'm sure I've been the annoying neighbor a couple times. One time, our neighbor, who is a really nice guy, we love his dogs. There were times where he was working out of town a lot and he was dating somebody, so he wasn't home a lot. Like, I mean, he was gone. Like, it looked like that house was abandoned for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so I went over we were sitting on his grass was getting out of control. Mm-hmm. And there had been a couple times where Justin had cut his grass, but he was one of those neighbors that like the city came out and cut his grass because somebody complained. It wasn't us. We always tried to help him out. We always tried to keep an eye on the house. But one day, like I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, I'm like, we're sitting on our patio and put all this work into the landscaping, and then I'm staring across the way and these weeds are just like this tall. Right. So I went over there and pulled all the weeds, and Justin kept going, "You're about to cross the line. You're about to cross the line." I'm like, I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I just pulled the weeds. It's fine. Like, I'm just pulling the weeds. And then I'm like, I'm going to go get some rock and fill in. He goes, "Nope, absolutely not." He's like, "You're absolutely not doing that." He goes, "I understand you're trying to be nice." He goes, "But you don't do that to somebody else's house." I'm like, okay, I can.
Which I get. However, it sucks when you've got somebody that's like, if they're not going to hire somebody to at least take care of the lawn, everybody else has got to look at that. And I get if you don't have the means, but that's when you like that's the thing about neighbors is that I feel like the stipulation around neighbors is just like people don't talk to their neighbors like they used to.
No, they don't. And that's a bummer because Justin never knew his neighbors. And I remember the lady who lived next to us up until she passed away, we knew her name, but we referred to her as the Pepper Lady. And that's because when Justin first moved into the house, his mom and dad and brother came over for dinner, and his brother goes, "Do you have any pepper?" And he's like, "No, I never use pepper." He goes, and Justin doesn't cook. So it's like his mom brought food over, and he goes, "What do you mean you don't have any pepper?" And he's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, I'm going to go ask your neighbor to borrow some pepper." And he's like, "No, you're not." He goes, "It's your neighbor. Do you not talk to her?" He's like, and there was this whole back and forth, and he went over there and she gave him some pepper, and so that's what they referred to her as. And then we talked to her, and then as we had kids, we started meeting more of the neighbors.
Yeah,
like Justin didn't talk to anybody because he was the single dude who was always working. So until I moved in, there was like you didn't talk to your neighbors. Hell, we didn't talk to our next door neighbors when Neely and Brian lived there, who we're really good friends with now. They're in town visiting. They don't even live here anymore, but they visit when they're in town. And we didn't even know, like, we had to have lived here for years before, at least 6 years, because it was after I had Miles. We kept thinking that she was the girlfriend of the son who sat out in the car all the time, because we saw her. They had a similar car. They had a car that looked almost identical. I'm like, well, that must be the boyfriend's, like, that must be the son's girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And Justin goes, "I don't think so." And then I'm like, "Yeah, but he's married." Like, right. We assumed they were married. We didn't know that they were a divorced couple still living in the same house because they had older kids. And we would have never, because we didn't talk to the neighbor. It just, I don't know, like, it was that beginning of like social awkwardness where Justin's pretty outgoing. I was just like, nah, I don't care. But then all of a sudden he comes, I'm big and pregnant with Miles, like miserable, about ready to pop. And he goes, there's a baby over there. And I went, what? He goes, there's a baby next door. Someone had a baby. I'm like, who? And like, we had no idea. So I go, are you sure they're not just watching TV? He goes, I know what a fucking baby sounds like. He goes, it's a newborn baby. And I said, okay. Months go by. We're sitting outside with Miles, and he's in a swing, and we see them outside, and it's Neely and Brian and their son Connor in a swing. And she just goes, well, hi, I'm your neighbor. Like, she came over and introduced herself. And because we never did that. And there was a whole story going on that we didn't know about. Like, we had no idea, like, they were married, and we had no idea because we just didn't know our neighbors. I mean, obviously it's none of our business, but we could have known them sooner. Because we knew that we knew it, like, from a surface level. There is a husband, there is a wife, there are 2 kids. They both work for Quick Trip, and their parents come over and help mow the grass when they're too busy. That's about the extent of what we knew about them.
I know my neighbor's name, and we talked on the occasion. What's so funny is a couple of months back, Cole's truck, we realized the neighborhood had been robbed. Cole's truck was gone through. We were like, what the hell? And so I'm like talking to the neighbors because we didn't have our cameras set up yet. We have our cameras set up now. And what was so funny is my neighbor, I'm talking to him, I'm like, hey, I just don't know if you have cameras, if we could maybe see what's going on. We're just trying to figure out what happened. Like, we're going to set ours up. We just didn't know if you have footage of last night. He's like, no, I don't have cameras. I'm sorry that happened, but I'm sure they were looking for CDs or something. And I was like, oh, you innocent man. Nobody's looking for CDs these days. That's such a like old school thing to say, is looking for CDs or music. I'm like, no, they were robbing people of their guns and money.
Oh my God. We didn't know it, but we came home one day. This was back when I don't know if I was working for one of the roofing companies or if it was so long ago I was still working at the bank. There's a split level down the street that we came home one day, and the FBI and the ATF are all outside, like swarming this house. And we noticed that they always had their windows covered and cameras on. We think they were cooking meth.
We had somebody in our neighborhood in Magnolia that it was like that. It was like, it was so cold outside, negative cold, like wind chill. And they would all have their windows open, but everything was like, they were cracked, but there was something always in front of them. Like, you couldn't see into the house at all. And the people there were so sketchy.
Yeah. There was a drug dealer though, living at the house at the end of the block. We had a neighbor that had like a college age kid who was for sure selling cocaine. I mean, we could just sit and watch. Like, the people, like, he was either buying it or selling it. But there was a guy who would just pull up on a motorcycle, and he'd come outside, and then the guy on the motorcycle would pull off. And then a little bit later, somebody in a random car would pull up and then would pull off. And I'm like, that kid's on drugs and selling drugs or so there's like obvious stuff that you can pick up on. And it's like, I mean, if he's not selling it to the neighborhood kids, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
But plus, you end up getting in trouble, like karma catches up with you. Right. The other thing was, we have one of those houses down the way, at the end of the street, next to the house that has 5-6 dismantled vehicles in the front that someone's always working on. There's a house down there that you described. It's like, how many people live in that house? Because by my count, it seems about 17.
I was going to say 17. I don't know why you're thinking the same number, but that's what it seems like.
You see kids of all ages. You see multiple adults, and I'm just sitting there going, how many fucking people live in there?
Right.
It's just more of a curiosity. It's not really an annoyance. So the other thing that drives me nuts, and it drove me more nuts when I was younger, and the kids were younger, when my kids were younger. Were those kids who fucking live down there and work on cars fly down the street.
Oh, that makes me so mad.
Fly down the street.
There was one lady in the Magnolia house who drove down the street, and Cole walked outside and she sped off. But like, the kids were in the middle of getting out of the street because she was flying down the street. We were both watching going, oh my God, like, get out of the street. She slams on her brake because she doesn't see us. And she goes, get out of the road. And then takes off as soon as Cole walks out and is like, hey, like, don't talk to the kids like that.
Don't yell at the kids like that. These subdivisions don't have fucking sidewalks.
No.
That's the thing. It would be different if the kids were dorking around and like not paying attention to the cars.
But they were trying to get out of the way. The girl was flying down the street. I mean, absolutely flying, to where she had to slam on her brakes. But both of us were like, what just happened?
Yeah, I hate that. Like, I hate that shit. So like, you're still always going to deal with that. But like right now, I would say I try my best to not be the inconveniencing neighbor.
Yeah, I'm not one of those neighbors that like if something happens that's an inconvenience or it's inconsiderate, I'm not trying to do that on purpose. It just
No.
happens.
My funny story, my mom, like referring to like the RV. So my mom lived in my parents' house was on a one-way street, so it was super narrow. And man, that she hated the neighbors across the street. Well, she hadn't always had a bone to pick with one of the neighbors, but the ones across the street used to drive her nuts. And it was hard, like legitimately, like even when my parents were older and I was driving my truck, like pulling out of that driveway was difficult. So if somebody was parked all the way up to the edge of the driveway, it made it very difficult. And if somebody was parked across the street, you had to be very careful because you could easily back into a car. Like you had to turn really tight. Well, at one point, those neighbors had like a drivable RV, not a huge one, not like a tour bus size, but a decent sized drivable RV. And they didn't have a place to put it. Like they didn't put it in storage. And my mom would, and the city was like, technically you can park a recreational vehicle or a boat for like 48, 72 hours. So my mom would wait and she would call, but they knew that my mom would call the cops and they knew when she would call the cops, and so they would move it because the police would come by if somebody complained about a vehicle being on the road. They would chalk the tires, like they'd take a
See if they were moving.
Yeah. So
that happened to me.
Yeah, they put a stick of chalk and they draw on the tire, but then they knew, okay, it's been 2 days, bitch across the street's gonna call the police. They would drive around the block. They would just drive around the block and park like 3 feet, 4 feet, or sometimes on the other side. And she's like, they're doing that on purpose. And they're like, they're moving it.
Right. So that's what happened. We had just moved I was still living with my parents at the time, my mom and stepdad. We had just moved into this house and I parked on the street, but like here's the driveway and here's where I parked. Like I always made sure I was like right in front of our house. I wasn't in front of anybody else's house. And I was in college full time and working full time. That car was constantly gone. I was always moving it. I was always driving somewhere. I wasn't sitting there for 24 hours at a time. There's no chance. And the time that it would be like I would be off for the day and didn't have school and didn't have work and did not leave the house because I was always gone.
Right.
So we moved into this house. Next thing you know, this cop knocks on the door and is like, hey, someone reported this car hasn't moved for a while. And my mom's like, what the hell? Like, she's literally gone all the time. This is the one day that she's off and she did not move it, but it's gone all the time.
Right.
And so they did that to my car. They chalked the tires.
Yeah.
It was moving, but I was going to work in like an hour. So it was just like,
yeah. And your schedule is probably the opposite of the people who live there.
Right.
So in their home, it seems like your car's always sitting there.
Right. But it was just like we had just moved into the neighborhood.
And I'm not, and that kind of stuff's fucking nitpicky. So here's the thing. I can see being the inconvenienced neighbor, but at the end of the day, if you have 4 people living in a house and the driveway only fits 2 cars, where the fuck else are they supposed to park?
I could have, I eventually moved into the very end of the driveway. It was a longer driveway. I moved into the driveway so nobody could say anything about it. But it was like, I remember my mom went into like the Facebook group or like the neighborhood app and had like made a post and was like, is this how you guys welcome new neighbors to the neighborhood? Like, we've been here for like maybe a week. This is ridiculous. So
yeah, that's insane. But no. Yeah, I mean, we don't really have like, honestly, the neighborhood's great. Like I said, the stuff that I feel is like an inconvenience to me is because I'm a crab ass now that I'm older. It's not really any, like, honestly, the neighbors aren't inconveniencing. Like, we don't have this issue. I've never had issues with anybody stealing anything. I mean, my car's been, the back of my window, I had a minivan, my windshield got shot out by a BB gun. And it was like some kids they caught. They were driving around shooting out windows. They got arrested. We actually got a restitution check. But like, there's never been, knock on wood, anything where people were breaking into a bunch of houses. There's been some little things. We've been fine. I've never had neighbors be completely inconsiderate where they're parking in our yard or parking in our driveway, like that kind of stuff, or loaning things out we didn't get back. Like we have pretty good neighbors, and people kind of keep an eye, especially on this street, the neighbors that we have. I know the neighbors that I can say, hey, we're going out of town, and they go, okay, we'll keep an eye on the house. So there was one time I employed my neighbors where I'm like, listen, Miles is not going. He's still in high school. He had a girlfriend at the time. I'm like, I need to know if anybody comes in and out of this house.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, no problem.
That's funny.
But outside of that, we've got pretty good neighbors. I wish people would use common sense and not mow their grass at 8 p.m. on a Friday.
This is true. I've never seen anybody do it that late in the evening.
Yeah, 7, 8, where it's starting to get dark. And that was the thing. We were sitting outside and it's like trying to watch a movie and it was so fucking loud. And I'm just like, it's literally getting dark. What are you doing? Anywho, fun convo.
Well, if you would like to hear, can you hear that? They're cutting stuff. So I didn't know if it's like loud in here. So
No.
if you would like to hear a certain topic, if you would like some advice, if you would just like to chat, you can reach us on Instagram at F__K your pod, or you can email me at Emma@99creatives.
Or Katy at 99 Creatives.
If you are interested in more business related content, you can also follow our business account on TikTok and Instagram, which is _99 creatives. And don't forget to subscribe. We put out new videos every Friday. Okay, bye.
Adios.